All right, so at this point, new to stage is Sir Bob Egan. Bob Egan's the CEO of Sepharim Group, longtime friend, longtime board member. Next to him, you have Jack. You saw Jack this morning. Next to him, you have Isaac. Next to Isaac, you have Ken. And next to Ken, you have Adam. Okay, so cloud computing. Everybody's been talking about it. We went from the concept of everybody moving to public cloud to moving to hybrid cloud to doing private clouds to doing now multi-cloud, which is usually a combination of public cloud, SaaS apps, and maybe you're doing your own private cloud on-premise. So without further ado, I thought that I asked the panel if they would just come up with maybe one recommendation or consideration that if you're looking at redefining or building a new cloud computing strategy, something you should be thinking about. And I know I was having a discussion with Isaac about this, and one of the things that Isaac said is that some people define things as cloud that aren't cloud. So maybe, Isaac, you could kick us off with a concept of what do you think people should be considering when they're looking at cloud, and what is or isn't a cloud for an organization?
Yeah, so, I'm one of the guys you might call up and say, can you help do a cloud assessment? Can you help define a cloud strategy, whatever you want to call it? And, what I advise people when they come to me with that question is to think through the reasons why you're doing it. The move to a cloud is like moving to another data center. It has its own infrastructure concerns, its own applications concerns, its own security concerns. It has opportunity to reduce cost, it has opportunity to create new services. If you move to Amazon or Azure, whole families of services become available to you. It has different security concerns. So, I like getting grounded very early on what mission you're trying to solve by moving to there. A lot of people that I help with moving to the cloud have customer-facing applications. So they're looking to the cloud to give them some more versatility, allowing them to scale up, to scale down, in some cases get to lower costs when they're running consumer-facing applications around it. Also in the data and analytics space, a lot of clients who look at, I have a steady stream of data science activity, but once every 4 months we have a massive analysis that we need to do, or we're bringing in a whole new data set that needs additional infrastructure to run. So they're looking at the elasticity of the environment and taking advantage of those things. And then, in places where an organization may not have invested before, so maybe it's self-service provisioning, or maybe it's, they don't have a mirrored development environment in their on their desktops, and they look to moving to the cloud, saying, I'm going to stand up virtual workspaces in the cloud, do it on Amazon or do it on Azure, and get a place where anytime I add or remove a developer, I have an easy way to turn on a new environment for them. So those are some of the reasons that different organizations look to move to the cloud, and I think it's important to ground in that, because what you forget are all the dependencies, all the considerations on network, on security, on performance, on management that come along with setting up a new environment. And if you can get grounded with your, what your key benefits are, then you can stay within a scope that might be manageable as you move forward with it.
And I'm going to toss over to you, because I think you've gone to the cloud in some cases and decided not to go to the cloud in other cases. Maybe you could share a little insight on how you decided to do A versus B.
Yeah, and I think it's just the cloud, depending on what your definition of it isn't for everyone. You've got to understand the workload that you're going to go to the cloud with, and what that need is for the organization, the whys of what you're looking at. And I kind of separate it from SaaS applications, which kind of everybody's been doing for a while, and we go there versus taking something I've traditionally had as an on-premise application and saying, how do I move this out of my data center into someone else's data center, whether it be public or private, for the cloud? And that's where we've done some work, both evaluating the workload, evaluating the readiness of our organization, saying, is this a right solution that makes sense for us to move to the cloud, or is it not? And back at SacOlick Global Partners, we had a commodities trading risk management solution that we had built internally and had traditionally managed it on premise. And as we were going through that, we need to get greater availability. Our team is going through a ton of other acquisitions and things. We don't have the time to manage this beast of an application. why don't we move it out into a cloud offering that we can use, really infrastructure as a service? So we had to go ahead and evaluate that from a workload, was the application ready, what we needed, we're going to get the right cost efficiencies, the service availability to go there, and then were we as a team ready to go do that? Could we support it in this new way as opposed to being on premise? And how are we going to move the data along with it and think about that and all the other needs for the data and data integration, which is one I think people forget about a lot, is how do I, great, I can go up here, but how do I move data over there and how do I do all these integrations which may not be all primed and ready for being in the cloud? In this particular application, we decided it was. After we evaluated the workload, after we evaluated what we needed to do, we did do that migration. We did it in a private cloud from one of our partners that we put that up there. It wasn't in an AWS or Azure type, although I've done that later on in my career as well. But we ended up going to move there. We also evaluated an ERP solution that we had to decide if this should also go along the same route, and we decided no, it shouldn't. The primary reason is we weren't ready. It wasn't that the cloud platform wasn't prepared for it. It was we as a team, because of some of the things we had and controls, weren't quite ready to make that leap. We were an 80-year-old company. We were very used to everything being inside our four walls. So we had to kind of go slowly in how we thought about that. But it was evaluating the workload, evaluating your readiness. I have this model about value on one side and readiness on the bottom. And as we look at the two, as we hopefully move farther and farther to the upper right quadrant, we say, yes, we're good. And that helps us understand, yes, we can go. Yes, we're going to have the right business case and meet the goals and objectives.
Yeah, this question of value and readiness comes up a lot. Adam, I know that you're dealing with, you've dealt with both established large companies and with smaller startups. Are you seeing a difference in terms of how those two groupings look at the cloud?
Absolutely. It's a really good observation, Maribel. A lot of the clients that I'm working with right now are on the smaller stage, the smaller startup stage, and they're helping larger enterprises who are dealing with multi-cloud environments. Because it isn't just one cloud or a cloud, it's multiple clouds. It's AWS, it's Azure, it's Google, it's private cloud. And so I've got a client, for example, in the security space, speaking of security, that is helping people move encryption keys, distribute them throughout the various clouds, but bring their own encryption key rather than depending upon that cloud-specific encryption key for their databases, applications, users, et cetera, and aggregate those. So from a security standpoint, it's a single pane of glass. So manageability in the cloud is a very big, important thing, and manageability across multiple clouds is really important out there.
I think manageability across multiple clouds is very complicated at this point. It's one of those things we're talking about, but I haven't seen a lot of good solutions to date at this point. And I don't know if either Ken or Isaac, are either you looking at multi-cloud strategies right now with your vendors, with your customers?
Inevitably, we find that something is a proprietary payload that works better on Microsoft's platform, or maybe IBM's platform, or even Oracle's platform. And all of a sudden, a small group is in a multi-cloud environment, thinking through how to, secure channels, data channels across them, thinking through of how to deal with billing from two partners, how to do monitoring across two partners. So, I think it's a more common problem than we're talking about, and it adds to the cost of running in these different environments.
Yeah, that's actually the cost component I'm going to circle back to. But Bob, I know that you've been talking to a lot of senior IT leaders about their strategies. Where is the cloud playing in there, and what have you seen them struggle with?
I think some of the leading organizations are planning with end of life of cloud as we know it today. And I know a lot of you have been wrestling with the OpEx and CapEx decisioning, moving from data-centric organization to moving to public, private, and hybrid kind of clouds. The wrinkle here is that as we think about artificial intelligence, machine-to-machine learning, and moving more intelligence out to the edge, especially with IoT, the problem is that existing cloud architectures under whatever umbrella you're currently using don't work. And the single biggest parameter is not how much more computing capacity can you get through an elastic workload in a cloud, or how much more capacity for storage. It's the latency associated with these regional and continental approaches that certainly the big three have taken in their cloud deployments. That's giving rise to something that I call microclouds. And these are much more geographically relevant installations of clouds that more and more organizations are pushing on their suppliers. Many of these are very new suppliers because you have a physics problem, right? It's a time distance. And so you think about a lot of the work that's being done with AI and M2M and IoT and transportation and in security and in energy, they're finding that they can't move enough intelligence out to the edge to do the kind of computations that some of these efforts really require. So they're still taking advantage of backhaul into large computational databases, but they can't get enough memory and enough computational power out at the edge in the centralization of whatever's taking place. So there has to be some sort of concentration point as an interim, and these are these things that I've been talking about called microcloud. So I would say to you that as you continue to look at current schemes around workload and capacity, the kinds of deployment that some of my colleagues have talked about, begin thinking now that over the next 10 years, how you look at cloud is probably end-of-lifing the current schemes and looking at what you need to be doing next. And if you're in transportation, energy, security, and some of those other markets, you should already be thinking about that today.
Now, I know Jack did a conversation earlier with us about voice and how to think about voice and the different ways of doing that. I also know that Jack has spent a long time looking at what we now call digital workspaces. So I thought maybe you could spend a moment talking about how you think that fits into people's strategies. Is it part of the cloud strategy? So many people are embracing SaaS services, but there's also desktop virtualization, there's also new workspaces. Like, where does this fit in?
Yeah, there are a lot of ways. And I look at TechTarget takes massive global surveys every year and even more frequently of 4,000 and 5,000 IT professionals globally. And for 2018, all across all the different aspects of IT, cloud and SaaS is huge. And so that shows up in narrowing in on my end user computing area. Even when we ask the people, what are the top features that you want out of your upcoming MDM purchase, your enterprise mobility purchase, identity and access management is a top feature. Or if we say, what's your top desktop project? Obviously in 2018, it's Windows 10 migration, but right in there, number 2 or number 3 is adopting SaaS applications. So it's where our surveys are showing that it's a huge effort among our audience right now. And what's interesting is that since so many SaaS applications, they may be mobile enabled by default. So you may make a strategic decision to move to Office 365 or Salesforce or a Box or some other SaaS application. And mobile just happens to be a side benefit. But what it does mean is that how you deliver end user computing really is changing very much. And one of the realities today is that for someone who may have started out as thinking of themselves as the desktop person, and then maybe now they're the mobile person, well, now they're the identity management person as well. So if you're tasked with delivering the end user experiences, things like getting used to SAML and SCIM provisioning, if these aren't things that you're doing today, they're things that you will be doing very soon, as well as conditional access, as an example of another trend that cloud will be forcing your end user computing estate to change.
Yeah, that all makes a lot of sense. I want to circle back to this concept of cost, because I think when we all looked at cloud computing, we thought it was about cost savings. Is it really about cost savings, or is there another way we should be thinking about this? I see a couple of head shakes here. Adam, you were shaking your head?
I was shaking my head because a lot of the security discussions around cloud circle down to cost, right? There's a new company out there, probably a bunch of you have heard, I don't have any relationship with them, called Zscaler. And they're basically offering a secure cloud as a service out there. So basically take away any kind of device management, identity management, they do it all through a secure cloud. Okay. It's like a managed service offering, and their key thing that they're offering people is not only cost, but cost of avoided downtime, cost of avoided infiltration, cost of avoided malicious behavior. So there's a lot of costs that they figure into their sales process. I know because I've worked with people that work there. And they're basically, saying that, hey, the cloud is a dangerous place. We are the new West. We're marshals in the new West. And we've got a different way of looking at this. We're not worried about individual components, or like the apps, the apps, the devices, the people. It's the whole new landscape. And basically, you can't get out to the network without going through their cloud.
Okay.
So that's the way that they look at it.
It's the new cloud-enabled firewall. There
It's
you
the
go.
new West. That's it. It's the new West. And I don't know if it's the right model, to answer your question. I'm not saying it's the right or wrong model, by the way. I'm just saying the facts. And I think from a cloud cost standpoint, it can save you money. And private cloud, I do have a customer in that space, and they're saving people like 75% off of Amazon and off of Azure and off of Google. So people that have gone, oh yeah, I'm going to go cloud, I'm saving money, I'm doing this. Well, no, they're actually finding that it costs them a lot more. And this client of mine, they're basically saving people 75% off of what they're spending on cloud. So yes, cloud can cost less, but buyer beware. It's like your initial foray into Amazon, Azure, or whatever, it may be more expensive than you think. And it kind of creeps up, bill creep. And you can actually save money by doing a private cloud.
I think a lot of people might also have stories about they look at their VM instance in AWS and it's like, oh, it's only pennies, or for bigger ones, a few bucks an hour. But
That's right.
We've probably all heard a lot of stories about what happens when you accidentally leave that huge VM on for a month and didn't realize it. That happened to us, to the VM that we used to process our podcast about 5 years ago, and get hit with a big bill. And
I think there's been a lot of discussion about this cost factor, and it's been an unrealized fantasy for a lot of organizations. They tried to think that there is some magic model to relieve OpEx and CapEx costs associated with running data centers, and they're unrealized. I think cloud, for its cost, has brought significant new agility into how organizations operate with things like SaaS-based applications.
Yes.
You're getting so many more features and security and agility.
Right, but you couldn't build yourself as fast, right? And so that's been the benefit.
It's not about cost, it's their cost per capability. You're getting new features that have that
that's right.
agility in there. And I think as I look at it a lot, for me, it's always been about moving these enterprise applications up. Does it make sense to go there? And when you think about it, I'm suddenly going to get this great cost. If I just take like for like, I'm probably not saving any money. What I am gaining is new capabilities and things we couldn't do before that can mean other things for our business and the business outcomes we're trying to get to. If we think about, I told the example earlier, we moved this commodities trading platform in production out to a private cloud. Before we got there, we tested the waters to see how things were going to be, and we did that from a development perspective. So let's move all our non-prod environments up into this private cloud, see how we were going to be able to function in there, making sure that was going to work. And that suddenly provided greater capabilities for us to do more and better with development, our testing cycles that could go through so much faster because we could spin up more environments as we needed them, and we could do it faster than the traditional methods of, okay, provision this new environment now here in our facility and get that going, copy the data over, and get that ready. We were slowing things down. When we started to be able to spin things up as we needed them, having that greater capability, we suddenly reduced the number of defects being put into a production release of our application because we had better testing time. Now, it wasn't just because of the cloud, it was because we also implemented some concepts, a little bit of what we talked about yesterday in DevOps with another component of that, which is called data ops, and how we manage the data differently. Also supported that, but going to the cloud gave us greater capabilities. So I don't look at it necessarily as a cost savings, which is great if you can get it. Right. It's really about what's my total cost of ownership and my cost per capability that I'm getting. And sometimes I'm willing to spend more money for greater capabilities in my organization and give me scale, agility, and enable me to do other things instead of just managing all that in my own data center.
And besides IoT and the things I was talking about out at the edge, sorry, Isaac, because I want to pick up on this cost per capability, I assure you that the next big cost per capability bump that's going to affect every organization in this room is bringing blockchain into your organization. And for that, you're going to need the computational power and the elasticity that comes with cloud. It will be there. Mark my words. I'm not talking about Bitcoin or EOS or any of the payment derivatives. I'm talking about blockchain as identity ledger. It's going to be there, and it'll be key to your security as well.
Supply chain, there's a whole bunch of work.
Supply chain, you're absolutely right, Maribel.
You can find cost now. I mean, I found cost. I mean, it happens in specific situations. I was CIO of a $180 million business and a multi-billion-dollar enterprise, very data center focused. We were getting charged back for services that we weren't consuming, that we weren't using. We were $30 million in IT for a $180 million business. It got divested. We went 100%. Yeah, do the math.
Yeah, I was saying that's very disrespectful.
You know, people look at me like, what do you do about that?
Talked about ratios this morning, but that may not be the ratio you're looking
Oh, that's
Like
not
a
good.
cable bill or something, right?
Well, we took a third of that out just by moving all the applications to the cloud after a divestiture. We had another client, they had a small data center in their office, running VMware, doing very efficiently, couldn't find a lot of cost until they said, well, our lease is up in 2 years. And I said, well, do you really want to pay what you're paying for your office space here? Or do you want to look at lower cost office space and not have to worry about this data center and not have to worry about a lot of equipment that's coming up for end of life? But Jack actually said something that's also very important, beyond just services, beyond cost savings. Think about what your IT services people are doing on a day-to-day basis to keep your infrastructure running. They're looking at network issues. They're looking at SAN issues. They're looking at, a physical desktop is broken issues. And now you're moving to the cloud, and a lot of those infrastructure issues are now your cloud service providers' issues. And so instead of those same people looking at physical hardware problems, they're now solving application issues. They're solving end user problems. And that's a huge shift in their mindset, in their skill set, and the types of things that they're doing. But it's much more important for us to be able to service what the end user is doing with those applications than the underlying infrastructure that's supporting it.
Absolutely. So at this point, I don't know if anybody's yes, Spencer's in the back of the room. I'd like to open it up for questions. Any questions to our panelists? We've had a wide range of topics we've discussed on cloud at this point. Anything you're struggling with that you think you might want an answer to? Okay, George has one.
Wait for George.
Adam, you mentioned Zscaler earlier, and just in the mix of the conversation, can you give any insights in terms of what would warrant a stronger consideration for that approach, specifically from that security posture standpoint?
It's a really good question, George. Thanks for bringing it up. I think what Zscaler represents, in my opinion, is kind of a continuation of a trend. When I was back in Fortinet back in the day, Fortinet was doing a managed security service provider play, or MSSP play. That basically, you're buying your network connectivity and your security from a third-party vendor rather than having you, the enterprise, having to build it out. Zscaler has taken that one step further and said, hey, we're like a giant MSSP that basically takes away any of the risk from buying outdated equipment or updating your infrastructure, having to buy the people to update the infrastructure, and having a network that is always available, right? The uptime, the 5 nines, the uptime availability. I think the approach that they're offering, George, it strikes me as a really good approach. I mean, they definitely have a lot of the right ideas about putting a secure, connected pipe to your apps, your network, without you having to worry about being the systems integrator and building the various pieces, right? This always bugged me when I was at SAP. We would force some of our customers, on-prem especially, to be the systems integrator, which is ridiculous. Your customers don't want to be systems integrators. Your customers want to use the product, right? They don't want to be the technologist behind it. And so Zscaler is basically taking that approach and saying, we'll be your systems integrator for everything you need for network. Now, it cuts negative because one way, George, because do you really trust everything that they're doing, because they're taking a very new global approach. They're rolling out their data centers globally. Do you know everything that they're doing, and are you comfortable with it? Is it the commercial off-the-shelf approach that, hey, it's like, I don't know about that COTS approach. I want something more. You already have more. You feel like you may be stepping back if you go into that. So that's what my worry would be if I was buying Zscaler. I'd want to understand what's behind the curtains. I'd want to understand more.
So in that type of scenario, do they also assume some of that liability in terms of your uptime? So, right, I mean, it's my service that they're basically operating on my behalf, but at the end of the day, it's my service.
It's your service.
So are they going to assume some of those same risk or liabilities with me at the same time?
That's the issue. I don't know. I don't know the answer to that question. That's a really good question. I don't know if they'll assume the liability. And if you build it, hey, you've got your team saying, hey, it needs to be reliability. It needs this amount of uptime. It can't have downtime. Downtime costs me, if I'm in a big production business, a couple $100,000 per hour or maybe per minute, if you're really in a very retail-intensive business, for example, or trading type of business. So yeah, I mean, there's definitely that, and that translates into real dollars, George.
Any last questions? Okay, maybe a quick lightning round from the panel. One thing you'd like the audience to take away in designing cloud computing strategies? Let's start with Adam.
The multi-cloud environment. I think the multi-cloud environment is something that people need to think about because the whole BYOD, I think the D has always been an X. I started doing this at SAP. It's bring your own cloud, bring your own device, bring your own application, bring your own development environment. I think that there's multiple cloud consumption model here in most enterprises, and some of it could be in the shadows that you do not know about. So that's something that I would be wary of.
I think all clouds are not created equal, and all workloads are not created, so not everything's going to work the same, interconnected from one to the other. So take the time to evaluate each and ensure that what you want to move to the cloud is primed and ready both from the workload and your organization.
I think there's a tremendous opportunity to provide better services to your end customers. And I think about moving to the cloud, think about monitoring a lot more than you used to in your data centers. You have the ability to use logging more proactively, put application monitoring, alerts, reactive things that can respond to issues. So a lot of things that can improve uptime and reliability and performance are available to you in cloud environments.
For me, the time to create a digital workspace for your end users, it's now. This is something that I've been hearing about for years, and in 2017, 2018, between the spread of identity management and modern endpoints, and as Windows 10 comes on, the time to create that new workspace like end user computing experience is now, and it's actually possible to do all of it now for the first time.
Any pitfalls in that? I mean, anything you think people should be looking for to make sure that they have a successful deployment?
Well, of course, you don't have to do everything at once, and sometimes we think of workspace as one app or something, but workspace, it's simply the idea that our components, our endpoint management, our app management, our SaaS app provisioning, our identity management works together in intelligent ways.
I would say to look at your continuing move to cloud to reduce the amount of infrastructure that you own and operate, and also begin to look at how you can automate IT and the provisioning associated with a lot of the applications that you currently provision, the ones you maintain, the ones you update, and how do you begin to retrain that organization to allow them to do things that maybe provide more and better value to the overall organization.
I'm really excited about the concept of what kind of AI, ML offerings I can get in the cloud around vision, around speech and sentiment analysis to help kickstart efforts and projects within organizations. So they have to build 20% of it instead of 100% of it, which is great. So, all right, round of applause for our panelists.